All right, and we're live. Dr. Sara Erdner, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
I am too. I've been really pumped to have you come on after reading your book and the work that you're doing. It's book's called Dear Coach, What I Wish I Could Have Told You. And this the topic of really communication, I think, is so powerful. With like just the dialogue between coach and athlete. But what I got so much from that, I'll just give you my short review of this, is whether you're a coach or an athlete in sport, or you're a boss or employee, and like this really transcended just the realm of sport and athletics into how do we become better communicators. And from I saw so much of myself in some of these reading these letters that you put together, because there's times when I wish I could have said this to a former boss or a coach, and I had great relationships and great experiences with coaches, but also at the same time there was like those things that you wish you could have said, at different times. So the way that you put this book together, I really just have to give you kudos and flowers too.
Thank you so much. That's a what a way to start a
I
podcasting
know, right?
interview. Is like for you to just, thank you so much, patting myself on the back. No, I love that you're bringing up the communication component. My first two degrees, my bachelor in science and master's of science, is in communication studies with an emphasis on interpersonal communication. And then I had a life shift when I found out, sports psychology was a thing that you could study, and then did my PhD in that. So both of those worlds collided to really lead to this book. But the communication component, so 6 years of studying that, the biggest thing when I started writing this book was I was really surprised. I'll be honest with you, a bias I had when I said, write a letter. What do you wish you could have told your coach but never did? Like what was left unsaid? I just assumed I would get really constructive letters. Like, I didn't like you did this, and this is what I would have liked. And I started receiving thank you letters, and I
Hmm.
was like, oh, wow, this is interesting. The underlying message here is that on both sides of the coin, there is a lack of communication. So there's either just a like, thank you, coach, you were great, love ya, and then you walk off. But how are we not actually, what is the coach losing out on by not knowing the details of what you're actually truly thankful for, and starting to implement a specific gratitude practice, both from the athlete to the coach to the athlete, sprinkling in on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, whatever that is. And so that was a big epiphany for me. I was like, wow, I didn't realize the how deep of a concern the lack of communication is, but
Right.
that's okay. We have something that this is kind of the piece, this is the gap that we can fill. And wow, with education, we can help people really kind of grease that wheel.
Right. That's such a fascinating thing, because we often think of like, oh, what do we like resent or like wish we said? It's often so easily we go down a path of what were the negative things that we wish we spoke out more on. But at the same time, it's often we didn't say how much we appreciated something of, oh, they know I love them, or they know it was a good experience, not highlighting the good parts as well. And I think regardless of whether it was a positive experience or a negative experience, there's a big gap in just how we're communicating in this realm. And putting these letters together, I saw was so fascinating, because there's the constructive ones, which, to be honest, were very hard to read in some of them. Like you really feel for the person, and it's an anonymous thing, so you don't know if it's male, female, what sport, whatever it was, what level of athletics it is. It's just on a really a human based level here. But I thought it was so interesting that you came from like the athlete's perspective, because so many books are written from the coach's aspect. How do you communicate better to your athletes in tactics and strategies, versus why don't we just go to the athletes and just ask them what do they think?
Absolutely. That was born. So I want to say two things. I want to back up and
Mhm.
acknowledge I've had some reviews say, like, oh, me taking out the identifying information, I really struggled with that. But the reason why I chose to go that route was to take away. So let's say a coach is reading it and it's like, oh, this is a Division I football player. Like, or for example, maybe it's like a Division III volleyball player, and maybe it's a football coach reading it and going, well, that's just a female being a little. little much.
Sure.
Maybe she wrote this when she was on her period. I didn't want, because I wanted to again, I can write a whole nother book just on the diversity, equity, and inclusion aspect if I were to include those. But what I really wanted to get down to was the nitty gritty of the relationship and us to not get hung up and dismissive of a letter because, oh, well, this letter doesn't pertain to me. It's a female volleyball player and I'm a football coach.
Hmm.
When in reality, so much of the themes across these, if you really allow yourself to read these letters as if it was a letter written to you as a coach, can be really, it's a powerful practice if we engage in that level of vulnerability. Um, with that, to answer your direct question on the book itself, it's when I was in my dissertation, and to be very honest with you and the audience, when you get into school to do your PhD, some of what they say is like, hey, like kind of work smarter, not harder. You don't like, especially as a qualitative researcher myself, you want to interview those people you can get easier access to, which are coaches. If you're trying to get
Right.
access to athletes, there's more barriers you have to go through that could hold up your dissertation process and prolong your graduation. So a lot of it is balancing like trying to
Why
graduate
is
on
that?
time.
Why is that? Why are there more barriers there?
There's barriers because the athletic population is a protected population. So, like, I, as an
Gotcha.
outdoor, there's like HIPAA violations and
Hmm.
things like that.
Okay.
Like, I can't reach out. So, what I had to do is reach out to coaches and say, if you feel comfortable and want to, like, this is the purpose of the study, this is the IRB process. If you feel comfortable, send this to your, athletes. So, it's a little
Gotcha.
bit more of kind of gatekeeping, which I appreciate and I'd like that it's there. So I started out heeding the advice of my mentors, and I was just interviewing coaches on their lived experience of the relationship. And we would stop the recording and kind of have that end, like, oh, thanks for the blah, blah, blah. And then they
Sure.
would add a little bit more 2 cents, and I was like, oh no, I wish I was still recording.
Oh,
And
always.
they would almost always say, I would love to know what the athlete thinks. And I'm like, right? Same.
Yeah.
So then I'm a pretty rebellious person within particular boundaries. So I was like, you know what? I would rather uh like risk graduating later and actually do the research I want to do. So that's when I shifted gears, started interviewing athletes, and was able to get, I think because these coaches were really interested and they wanted to know what the athletes said, was able to get access to a good amount of athletes for the dissertation itself. And what I thought was going to be 60 to 90-minute interviews, that's what I wrote like in the IRB. That's what I
Hmm.
told them. They were like 2.5, 3 hour long conversations.
Wow.
And what I felt was that I was a neutral party coming in, expressing my passion for giving marginalized communities voice, athletes being one of those in the lesser power position. And I wasn't a teammate, I wasn't a parent, I wasn't an assistant coach. So they just really, I felt like just we were like a geyser when
You
it
were a
came
safe
to
spot to
like
open up to. Yeah.
yeah, and I loved that. And it actually, all of those interviews and how much the athletes opened up is what led me and really pushed me to write the book.
Mm.
Instead of going in academia, it's a little bit frowned upon. Like the whole process is do the dissertation and then cut the dissertation up into 3 or 4 publications. And that in and of itself, the peer review process is like could be a 2 to 3 year process. And I really struggled with like, okay, well, I want to get this book out there now, like these
Right.
stories. So thankfully my dissertation committee, very supportive of, they even were like, you need to write this in a book. And so they were very supportive of me kind of jumping ship, if you will, and going the non-traditional route, putting these letters in a book. And that journey was also a 2 to 3 year journey of just writing the book. It went
Mhm.
through many, many drafts to what it is now, which I'm proud of.
Yeah. How did it change from like kind of the soup to the nuts? Like how did it start from the first draft? What was the evolution of it? Because if people haven't got it first, I recommend different books before on this podcast. Anybody out there who communicates with people, you need to go and get this book.
Mhm.
A quick read of getting in, but just as far as, taking from the personal accounts is huge. But it starts with like, the good, the not so good, and the truth, which there's the ones that are thank you letters that are very deep. Then there's the ones that are tougher to go into the critical, and then there's the truth, which is your personal letter of getting in there. How did this change from the beginning process into eventually into what's out now that people can go grab and ingest?
Yeah, well, this story is a vulnerable one for me because it was me kind of calling myself out in the process. I was in the middle of writing the book, and the first draft was that I would offer. There were only 10 letters in the book, and I would offer a letter, and then I would come in after the letter and give my 2 cents, like my expert opinion.
Okay.
Here's
Yeah.
what you need to get from the letter, and with research and all that stuff. And I was teaching a methods of coaching class, and I was standing up there, and it was on it was on a chapter about coach power and the power relationship between the coach and the athlete. And so I was really encouraging using the textbook and peer-reviewed research that it's better for coaches to not take a more of a dictator role, to really like provide space for dialogue that can happen via like offering athletes. Like, let's say you're a basketball coach and the task for the day is to get better at layups. You want to increase your layup percentage. So offering the athlete saying, okay, here's the task for the day. We can accomplish this 3 ways. Here's 3 different activities we can do. Show of hands who wants to do this and go with the majority. That's a way that you can allow athlete voice into the sporting space so they feel like
Hmm.
they have a say. And it's less of you saying, we're going to increase our layup percentage. So we're going to do this all day. And then you get the athletes groaning because they don't really want to do it. But so I was talking to that students about that, and I, in the middle of talking, like stopped dead in my tracks, and I said, I'm so sorry, I need to step out really quick and call my editor. And I walk outside, I call Amanda, I tell him to talk, I give him like an open-ended question to talk amongst their like small group while I step out. I step out, I call Amanda, and I'm like, I don't know if this is okay to do, but I need to like really rewrite this book some. And she was like, "Yeah, we can do that." I had to put more money into doing it, like pay
Sure.
her more money to. So I was like, "This is going to be a costly edit, but it's worth it." And I said, "I need to shut up more," just like what I was telling the students. Like I'm sitting there telling them and teaching them, "You need to step back more and allow the athlete's voice in." And I'm writing the book in a way that is dictating to the reader what they should get out of the letter, which is the exact opposite of what I'm telling the students to do.
Mm.
So I told Amanda, I said, what I want to do is I want to gather more letters and I want to create, like, call the audience in. My favorite quote is a book read by 1,000 different people is 1,000 different books, because the way your lived experience interacts with a letter is different than how somebody else's lived experience is going to interact with a letter.
Right.
So me sitting there saying, this is what you should get. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm actually doing the very thing that I'm telling coaches not to do. So I got more letters. I spent the next couple months gathering more letters, um, and then decided to put the journal prompts in of like, provide the letter. How did you interact with the letter?
Yeah.
And then I put my part 3 in, which was really what I want to do is there's a shift that needs to happen in sport, but I don't want to situate myself as the expert with a capital T. I'm
Mhm.
an expert that has ideas, that's backed by peer-reviewed research and way too many years in school, and then also way too many years as a professor teaching this stuff. But it's a let's the book I want to call let's call ourselves in a round table and all start talking about this, because when we're asking for a shift like the one that I'm presenting, which is to shift into from an athlete-centered relationship philosophy, coaching philosophy, to a relationship-centered philosophy. That's a pretty big shift at every organizational level. So it's going to take time. This
Right.
isn't a overnight thing. It's going to take a lot of practical experience from coaches. Like, hey, I want your feedback. Um, this is my thoughts on it, and
Mhm.
let's collaborate. So part 3 is that. Part 3 is, if I was sitting around a table, this is what I would add, like things we need to consider to create a safer environment, not just for athletes. I also shifted the book to very much try to take an empathetic approach to coaches. Because when
Mhm.
you really sit down and read between the lines of these letters, the athletes are, and even in just my talks, there's a level of like, well, gosh, we're not doing right. The coaches don't have a lot of supportive resources. They're just kind
Right.
of, they don't have, Like, what about their mental health? Like, if they have a partner that gets diagnosed with cancer, what's there for them? But they just
Right.
have to like navigate it. So the book again could come off as like, oh, I'm calling coaches out, but I really want it to be a calling them in to a conversation because we have very, very much failed them, I think, from a coaching education standpoint, from an organizational standpoint.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating, thing, Sarah. When you talk about that with coaches, growing up, I remember we had a coach who built our entire lacrosse program in upstate New York, here where I grew up in Niskayuna, and state champion type level and stuff. But it took him a lot of time to get there with like zero support from, the school, no assistant coaches and anything, just had to bootstrap this from the beginning. And great coach. Everybody has great experiences, but I've often now just in older time, I met him when I was like in fifth grade, and now he's been doing it for a billion years. Now looking back, I'm like, man, that must have been like a tough journey. The guy's got a family, the guy's trying to figure this and trying to build a program with no support. Like that had to be some tough challenges in his head. And I think just like coaches, they're like second parents, right? It's like you think that you join a team, the coach has all the answers. They're like put into that position of power. But they're human beings just like everybody. And it's like they have their issues and they don't always know the right answers. And even when you were kind of describing that thing of like we can give three different, options to do, I know a lot of coaches would probably think like, well, I don't want to give up my authority or my power from there. So it's a very interesting balance that we have to, kind of figure out from there. So hearing directly from people firsthand from their letters, I thought was such an interesting way of putting this book together.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Um, Going with that, was there like a specific reason why you started with the good versus the not so good and then the truth? Was that actually like a thought process in your mind as far as like putting this book together of starting with more of the positive to say like, hey, no, like this is still like a good relationship that's going on. Was there like a intentional thought process behind that?
Yeah, I didn't want to just start out, bashing the coach,
Yeah.
just like from the gate. So I think the good was there to say, like, to set the tone a bit. And then transitioning into the more constructive letters, I believe I started out that part of just saying, like, hey, I really want, this is coming from a place of love. It's not, but I think it's really important that we start this book being a starting point of what might the athletes that you're working with letters be? And they could be thank you letters, of course, but the more constructive letters, like I don't think as a society, and especially like one of the points I make in part three is that sport was created by men for men to produce better men. And we have, of course, with Title IX coming into play, allowed women in, but there was never really any thought process of like the philosophy of sport stayed the same. It's
Mhm.
like it's created by men for men to produce better men. And then women can come in, but they have to assimilate. And if they don't, then you're just not cut out for sport. And I think that that's also been an injustice, not just on male bodies, but on female bodies, and then you can intersect that with all the other demographics. But I think one of the ways too, and a big thing within sport is that men in general are created into men by injury. And what that means is, in order to become a man, like when we look at little boys, for example, they're really sweet, very caring, empathetic. And then over the years, that gets beaten out of them, whether it's in school, whether it's by their own family structure, maybe even sport and the coaching relationship. Um, we have to also realize the concept of confidence, for example, is very much influenced by multicultural psychology. So, how a man might define confidence might be different than how a woman defines confidence.
Sure.
How a man that lives in upstate New York versus a woman that was raised in a Southern Baptist church in
Right.
the South, they might define confidence differently. So if you're a coach coming in and you have a definition of what confidence is, and you're measuring the athletes against your implicitly biased definition of confidence, that's not fair on the athletes. That's not taking the athlete and their entire worldview into consideration, and it could be impacting their optimal performance. I've had an athlete before. I've also worked with, I mentor aspiring mental performance coaches that they've also had athletes who they'll come in, they'll start talking about confidence, and in a one-on-one, the student will say it'll be like a female, and they're like, "Well, I really struggle with confidence, and because via the church, I'm supposed to be meek and modest as a woman." So these type things we're talking about with confidence feel really arrogant and almost like a perversion of what it means to be a good woman.
Mm.
So that's why it's if we just come in and we impose the male structured definition of confidence onto everybody, this is
Hmm.
even men, it's not an inclusive practice. So that could actually be causing a lot of cognitive dissonance within the athlete, potentially unbeknownst to them,
Hmm.
depending upon the age. So it's the coach's responsibility to be conscious of that, to
Hmm.
realize that their definition of confidence is influenced by their intersecting identities, plus whatever they've been told about confidence growing up. And that might not match that of their athletes. So I think when we look at all the themes across the letters, I started out with the good because when I get to part three, I'm really opening a bag of worms as far as complexity goes.
Right.
Because I want to say something here. I can almost sense there's a coach talking in the back of my head now going, okay, great. So I'm now supposed to like be conscious of all these cultural aspects when I don't even have time to finish writing the training schedules, and I'm losing sleep, and I don't have time with my family and my kids. That is why, to me, a massive, massive thing I'm um uh, pushing forward is coach mental health initiatives.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons why is we saw a rise in athlete mental health initiatives. But the unfortunate truth is that started happening off the backs of athlete suicides.
Yeah.
So do we need to wait on a coach to kill themselves?
Had to go so far down. Yeah.
Yeah, and to me, it's like, why would we have to wait for that? Why do we have to martyr somebody's life in order to? So if we can help work on coach mental health, restructure that schedule, then it's not going to feel so overwhelming for me to say, hey, coach, you need to consider the multicultural psychological component, the cultural component of each of your athletes. And also, that means starting with your own intrapersonal relationship with your own culture
Right.
as intersected by your demographics, and then understanding how that's impacting your interpersonal relationship. And that can be a very heady thing. It can be very overwhelming, which is why I said in the beginning, this isn't a like snap your fingers. This is a cultural shift into a relationship-centered sporting era.
Yeah. That's such an interesting frame, Sarah. It's a couple things come to my mind. The quote by Jim Rohn I always love. It says, instead of I'll take care of you and you take care of me, he says, no, I'll take care of me for you and you take
Mm,
care of you for me, which is, just talking about success, entrepreneurship, coaching, whatever it is. It still starts with you have to have your energy right before you try and project it out into others because you can feel that right away. Like when somebody's not on point. But I was thinking of like Bill Belichick as an example, with his Patriots dynasty. They always said like he figured out who his players were and then designed his systems around what they could do versus a lot of coaches, we have our methodologies and philosophies, and you have to fit into this. And if that doesn't work, that means you're the problem versus no, figure out exactly who, the people are that you have in front of you. And specifically, if we're talking about college or so, which you're going to turn over every few years of the new people. They're brand new kids that you have coming in. There's brand new people that you're working with different experiences from different cultural backgrounds, how they view and, perceive different things is going to shift. But I want to ask you about, because it is like an individual basis of connection, but also it's important to have like frameworks and kind of foundations to kind of start with. From the research that you had, let's start with the good, like from the good letters that you had. Were there common themes that you saw of what made that relationship seem much more powerful and why that was
Mm.
such a positive experience versus maybe the other ones that were not so good. We'll go to that next. But were there kind of some longest levers or ones that really jumped out as these are some foundational principles that these coaches and athletes really connected on?
Absolutely. And I think your example of Bill Belichick is a massive theme. The really from part one to part two, so the thank you letters versus the constructive letters, a major theme of the thank you letters were that the coaches were willing to take the time to get to know the player and make the player feel psychologically safe. So they were, I remember there was one letter that from an athlete that talked about how the coach would come in and they'd be like, "Oh my God, you did so great on that. Like, of course we need to work on X, Y, and Z, and we'll bite that off practice by practice." But like, gosh, and they were so heavy on the positive reinforcement of like, you really and I remember this athlete was like a very technical sport too. It was like they would even be like, gosh, like even the way this was going on and this, like I could see that you've been working on that. So it was just almost like 70% positive affirmations, 80% positive, and just like, yeah, and we'll get to that other stuff in the next practice. So it
Sure.
wasn't the underlying tone was that I believe in you and we'll get to it, but like, gosh, it's just I love watching you do what you do.
Mhm.
Um, and there was a sense of playfulness. There was in a lot of the letters, it was like, oh, we had this Halloween practice where we would come dressed up in costumes and play. Um, there was I can't forget if this is in a letter or just something I know that this one team does, where before a meet, they'll actually play like the hand slap game. Like they'll get a partner and
I love
like,
that.
have somebody has their hands on top of the others and they'll try to slap them. And it's just, it's a way to get them in because playfulness, there's research that demonstrates when you're in a playful mood, you're in the present moment, you're very much like that. The emotions that playfulness evokes are oftentimes performance enhancing emotions. So, it's more of like, hey, let's just get together and let's just like trust your training, right? Let's just get together, play this hand slap game, get a little giggly, and just go out there and have fun. And it's actually a team that's a very winning team on a national level. And
Mhm.
so it's those are themes I saw was just that a coach that didn't take it too seriously. Um, but I do want to regard this that I can see how that's a very hard thing to do because the hiring, retention, and firing process of coaches
Sure.
is a lot of times dependent upon the win-loss record.
100%.
So
Yeah.
you're just like, I don't really know, if I want to get out there and play a hand slap game. Like the level of control that you have to give up to trust that, to implement the playfulness, to trust that, oh, we're gonna have this one practice where we just play in like Halloween costumes, whatever they show up in, and it'll be funny, but like, are we actually going to get better? It's hard to get coaches to buy into the fact that that actually does positively relate to
Right.
because athletes turn coaches and you often coach the way you were coached. And if you didn't have a playful coach and you didn't get to like firsthand experience see the positive effect of it, it's hard to really like I don't know, that's kind of risky. If I like start implementing play, what if we start losing and then I lose my job? That's my livelihood, that's food on the table for my
Sure.
kids, that's my insurance, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I just want to empathize with coaches. Like I know I'm saying all these things, but I hear you in the back of my head. I really do.
Oh, I totally get it. That's why I love these conversations because it's not this just black and white. We were doing it wrong now, and then this is the way to go. And when you're in the shit and you just lost a game, and all of a sudden you show up in Halloween costumes, people are like, "What are you guys doing? Like, aren't
Mm,
you taking this seriously?" And all this stuff.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think another thing as well is uh coaches going back to the hiring, retention, and firing process is that something at a systemic level that I think we need to reevaluate. And I would love to get around a table to have this discussion with those that have power over that hiring, retention, and firing process. And maybe even just listening to these podcasts would help.
Mhm.
Is uh, how can we build out that process to formalize it more at a human resource level that there are other buckets to fill that's not just the win-loss record. That is how could we measure the quality of the relationship? So one thing I kind of throw out there, and I'm definitely not saying, oh, this is what we should do, but I do think we could maybe take a page out of the academic book. As a professor, I have end of the course evaluations from my students. And not that I'm like everything I do is just, oh, I'm going to do this just so I'll get a good eval. Because like I said, I just sent an email to a student that I don't think they're going to give me a good evaluation at the end of the semester. Um, but it's, like helping them be, see professionalism a little bit more.
Mhm.
But they are there. Those are taken into consideration with my own retention, like hiring, retaining, and firing process. So how could we take that component of academics and maybe bring it over to influence a new operation with coaching evaluations? I'm not saying it has to be like an end of a course eval, but let's get out of our echo chamber and look at other fields and what are they doing and how can we implement that to balance out the pressure of we have to win and lose. With that, that's also tethered to money, right? So
Sure.
that's
Oh yeah.
hard. It's like, oh yeah, we're not gonna, like, what do you think? We're gonna do into the sport year evaluations with Nick Saban? Like he's bringing in so much money that we don't care what the athletes think.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying again, let's get around a table. I love my favorite artistic thing to do in the world is to collaborate with people because
Mhm.
there's something so beautiful. At the bottom of who I am, I'm a musician, I'm a painter. I just started doing comedy as well. And I think there's something so fun about you get into a room and you have an idea and then somebody adds to it. And the product at the end is something that you yourself couldn't have come up with. It took multiple
Right.
brains. And that's what I really am asking for with this book is like, let's honor everybody's lived experience and really get into a room open-minded and hey, I'm going to throw this into the pot. What do y'all think of this? What's good? What's not good about it? And maybe let's take some cookie crumbs here, add these Legos here, some sprinkles, and then you come up with
Right.
a new recipe that um, the hope is that it can be helpful. But obviously, there's the evaluation. Let's implement it. Let's do like a little pilot run.
Mhm.
Um, and again, that's going to take time. So this isn't, nothing I'm calling for is a microwave approach. It's very much, decades in the making.
Yeah, and I think, it's you can take a lot from like old school kind of methods of guys like Nick Saban or Bill Parcells. Bill Parcells lives in my town here in the summertime. I see him all the time. And, I mean, I'm a Giants fan, so that's like seeing
Mm.
God. Um, and it's like it's this fiery based mentality and stuff like that. And there's so much you can get from it, but it's not the only way to approach coaching. Specifically, like, I mean, they've built like this certain personality. You kind of know what you're getting already from brand, but most people too who are in coaching, like myself of working with, individual clients on there, it's not this like their win is to get to their goal, and but they want to enjoy the process of it as well. And I've seen a lot of people like in the personal training world who like think you need to be this like dictator and like you need to do exactly what I say to do, where I said, no, this is a dialogue. This is not a monologue that you need to do.
Yeah.
And it's like, they have to have input in this. You're a GPS, not a chauffeur. Like you're not sitting in the
I
back
love that.
and like I'm not driving you there. Like I'm showing you where we need to go, but you've got to have your hands on the wheel and work this
Absolutely.
together. Yeah. So looking at this from the other lens, from like the not so good, the critical letters from there, what were some of the common themes that you think like some coaches there are missing? That, seem like there was either not this feeling that athletes can, speak up and, say these things in the time. It is always nice when you can, hear this in hindsight from there, but at the same time, I'm like, oh my God, this would have been so good if this could have been a dialogue in the moment from here. I
I
think a lot of
know.
people could have had a lot better times in life.
I know. I just want to say this. Like I've been in therapy for 10 years and I'm still myself really learning how to have effective dialogue because we ultimately don't live in a society in the United States, and maybe other societies or other cultures are this way that really teach. We're very individualistic. It's very kind of like to each their own and look out for yourself and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So we don't really teach about proper communal dialogue. And that's something I'm still working on because I was born and raised in this society. And how do I want to create a micro world? Like even with my partner Kyle, I'm constantly like, hey, like we can. we have an opportunity just in this duo, this relationship, to create a micro space that we do want to live in, that is
Mhm.
communal, that is, thinking about nature and different things. So I just want to say that first, like I'm somebody who's actively trying to take accountability for how I show up. And that word right there, I think, is a major theme in the constructive letters, is the coaches not taking accountability for how they were showing up in coaching. And I see that not just in coaching, you see it across a lot of different domains, people in power that are um, maybe they like one of the letters that's coming to mind right now that I feel like I'm like recalling to help me explain this story was a athlete who had a coach that in during the recruitment process they came in and they were kind of making um not these grandiose promises but saying one thing. So the athlete decides to go to that university and they get there and it was like a bait and switch situation. And I remember in that conversation with the athlete, them saying, I was very impressed with how they were communicating with me. They were like, yeah, so I go to the coach and I muster up the courage to say, where like I thought my role was going to be this. This is what you said my role was going to be, and now I'm here and that's not it. So they were actually trying to open up dialogue to seek clarity, which is one of the tenets of uncertainty reduction theory that I talk about in the book. It's the first tenet actually, which is that uncertainty is uncomfortable and we want to seek to reduce it. That's a whole nother I love it. Uncertainty reduction theory is my first love. But that's a whole nother rabbit hole I could go down. But I was very impressed by this athlete because a lot of athletes don't feel comfortable going to their coach. So they go to their coach and they say, hey, I'm just confused. You told me this, I'm doing this. And the coach never, the frustration and the breakdown in communication in that relationship, thus the breakdown of the relationship itself, was that the coach was really kind of skirting around it. They weren't saying, you know what, I want to apologize because I did say that. Yeah, I did say that to you. You're right. Because when a coach doesn't take accountability for the things that they have said, that then later they might switch, which the switch is okay. Maybe there was nuanced situations going
Sure.
on, but when you can go and properly communicate and say, "Hey, I know I told you this, and you're not doing that right now. I can understand that's confusing." You're again, that's taking accountability. You're decreasing the uncertainty and confusion of the athlete, and you're protecting the relationship itself. The athlete then knows they can trust you when the athlete comes to you and said what's going on and you skirt around it, you don't acknowledge it, you're gaslighting that athlete. And that I see that a lot in athletics and with athletes that either approach the coach or they're just like, yeah, the coach said this, and then they're not doing that, they're not walking the talk.
Mhm.
And that just creates like in any relationship when that integrity isn't there of you say one thing and then you do another
Yes. Mhm.
of in a friendship, right? Like if you just think about friendships, familial relationships, dating, whatever it is, you're like, I don't know if I can trust this person.
Oh yeah.
So
Isn't there
it,
there's like research of that psychologically, right? Like if you catch a friend in like a lie, like the chances that you like ever even fully trust them again with stuff, it's like gone. That is so hard to build back up. And that was a theme I saw in a lot of the constructive letters of this is really just saying one thing and then acting another. Like
yeah,
that's a tale as old as time of in every context of human beings is not being authentic there.
yeah.
Yeah.
When I just want to say this, coaches, I can understand the pressure of that because I mean, I've seen coaches, I've worked hand in hand with them, the hours that they put in, the stress and the pressure that is there, that to I can understand the struggle of like having to add this relational component when they themselves haven't been taught how to relate with themselves first in an empathetic, unconditionally positive, regarded way and authentically. So how could they then, which those three tenets I'm talking about is it's the humanistic approach as discussed by Carl Rogers.
Mhm.
It's a way to engage in a therapeutic relationship. It's from the clinical psychology field itself, but it's such a beautiful psychological approach to relationships that there's another researcher, Dr. Lauren girlfriend, Henry, she graduated 2 years under me, that is researching that humanistic approach within sport. So a lot of the stuff that my book is talking about, why I don't explicitly talk about the humanistic approach and engaging unconditional positive regard, authenticity, and empathy, that's really what we see the athletes asking for.
Mhm.
And that empathy, some of the there was a multitude of letters that were also asking. It's not just empathy, but it's like a multicultural competency, a multicultural humility, empathy of, please realize that I'm also a cultural being, that the multicultural psychology is founded upon uh, the fact that we are born into a culture, and that culture shapes our identity. It shapes who we are, how we show up in the world. As an example, I am a cisgendered white female that was born and raised in the South in a Southern Baptist church. There were particular narratives that I grew up with during my formative years when I didn't
Mhm.
have critical thinking skills at the time that led me to have particular thoughts and cognitive appraisals and attitudes about myself, about others. As an example, I was taught to be a good woman meant to be meek and mild and submissive. So if it, which is funny because I'm not really any of those things. Like, pretty loud. I command space. I walk into a room, but I battled with that as a kid because
Mhm.
I thought there was something wrong with me. And
Sure.
then when I was a kid, if there was a woman that walked into a room and commanded space and was a
Mm.
leader and held her chin up and didn't falter to anyone, but did so in a humble manner, I was like, oh, that person's a perversion. So I was able to work through that, and some of that also impacted how I showed up as an
Mhm.
athlete as well. I kind of referenced this earlier, but when we really take a multicultural psychology lens and understand that every person, even coaches, sport administrators, bosses, whoever, you were born into a culture, the region you were born into, the religion, socioeconomic status, what your race is, sexual orientation, and the fluidity of that. Um, just so many things that you are, that is impacting the way you show up. It's impacting how you define confidence. It's impacting how you define yourself as an athlete, as a person. That is going to impact your performance. And it's also going to impact the relationship you have with people.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I mean, it's the geographic influence that comes on us and stuff. I've my good friend Dan John, the legendary strength coach, just talked about that as what makes a great athlete. And he said geography is huge. It was the first time I heard that. He's like, if Usain Bolt wasn't born in Jamaica, where sprinting is the number one sport in their country, if he was born in West Texas, he'd probably be an amazing football player. Or if he went to Iowa, he might be an amazing wrestler on there. So those things are all prevalent
Yep.
and part of
There's
this.
actually there's research that supports that. I took a in my sociology of sport class. I remember so vividly Dr. Chikas coming in and going, the question was, in the Olympics, do you think Sweden is better at skiing or the United States? And obviously he's asking a group of Americans in this graduate level
Yeah.
class.
Yeah.
So we all are
USA.
biased.
USA.
Yeah, our bias was like, oh yeah, red, white, and blue, of course. And he was like, no, sweet, because they are in a country where there's more access to the colder conditions, and they're skiing more. Obviously, people can like move to Colorado, which is where I'm at, and they can do all that. But it was interesting talking about the geography. Like if you're in Switzerland and you're in that level, so that was the first time I was introduced to that, and it was showing like there's research that does support like where you're born very much influences
Uh,
how you're going to perform in a sport. Again, I was born in the South. I wasn't born near a body of water, so I wasn't born rowing. So like
oh
I'm
yeah.
probably not gonna make a rowing team,
That's so
anywhere I
funny.
go. Yeah.
I had a story of that. I was managing a club and we had a second space that was in a hockey training center here, and we had some great hockey teams in our area. And there's the Pee Wee team, which is like 12 and under, and we had a team around here that was dominant. They were awesome, and they were going up to this tournament in Quebec. This like big Pee Wee tournament, like 15,000 people show up to watch these like Pee Wee kids play. And
Oh my
I
God.
was talking to the main guy who ran it, and I was like, man, like they're gonna like this team's awesome. Like they're gonna do really well. He's like, they're gonna get creamed. He's like, because those kids in because those kids in Quebec, like that, they're born with skates on. Like that was the thing, and they got
Yep.
absolutely crushed from these, Canadians in hockey.
Poor kids.
Yeah, I know, right?
Char- Character development, you know?
Well, there's a piece I don't want to overlap. There's a piece I wrote down here I wanted to ask you about, Sarah, was even in the intro of the book, one of the letters talked about an athlete's quote was, "Now I realize as an athlete, I didn't even know exactly what I needed from my coaches, and I didn't know how to articulate finding what I needed." Was
Ooh.
this a common theme that you saw too, like with like people in communications? Like sometimes is it not just a lack of open communication and feeling safe going to your coach or athlete, but sometimes it's just we have no idea exactly what we're searching for, how even to start with that conversation.
Oh my gosh, what a powerful quote. I love like hearing it read back to me. It just, I think this is also why it's really powerful because who I am today versus when I wrote the book, you reading that back, my lived experience now with extra years under my belt is resonating with that quote in different ways. It's hitting different kind of emotional chords in a good way. With that being said, I where I think we are breaking down is that it's sport is very unidirectional. We often hear coaches that'll use the word coachability. The athlete's really good, they're super coachable. And the subtext that you're writing is they obey it at all cost.
Hmm.
They deny themselves to do what the coach says. Sport, from the moment a person gets into it at whatever level, is very much just sitting there and doing what the coach says. We're not actually empowering athletes to explore that question. Well, what works for you?
Hmm.
Right? Because circling almost back around to the beginning of the conversation, which was coaches sometimes don't want to give up that control of
Yeah.
offering autonomy, offering options, that we've never even really have implemented into the coaching philosophy of nurturing athletes knowing what they want because all they've done is just blindly follow. That's why we see a lot of athletes when they transition out of sports, they have a really hard time managing their schedules because especially I worked in the academic success center working with the athletes when I was in grad school. And one of the things we saw is like they basically had their schedules made for them. It was just like,
Mhm.
okay, here's the
Right.
practice times you have to show up. They had the academic counselor finding the classes they take, and they'd get registered and stuff like that. And then they were like, here's your schedule. Just basically you have to show up. Then they transition out, and they're the ones having to make their schedule. They don't have, and that's a very massive transition for them to
Sure.
make. So again, it's just here you go. Here's this is what you're supposed to do
Figure it
today. This
out.
is where
Yeah.
you're supposed to go. And they're just being told all the time what to do. So there's never any option in there to say, what do you actually need from a coach? Because they've been told the entire time what you need is what the coach is telling you to do.
Right.
So where was the space for them to learn that? So some of that, hearing you read that back to me in this moment, it emotionally, when I say it emotionally, is hitting some chords in a good way. It's making me sad, and I think I've learned to all emotion is good, all emotion is neutral, and that sadness that I'm feeling is how we have failed athletes and also coaches, because coaches were likely athletes at one point before, by not, how did they get to a point where they're like, I don't even know what I want?
Yeah.
And they've been in sport for how long? That I feel like we in sport have failed athletes because if they don't know what they want from a coach, it's because we have created blind soldiers.
Yeah. It's, this one thing hit me so hard too on that is seeing it from the work that I've done in the fitness space of people come in and they say, oh, what's your goal? And that, oh, I want to lose 25 pounds or so. And then you actually start going down a layer or two deeper and having a conversation. All of a sudden you realize that's the tip of the iceberg of the goal. There are so many more things that are underlying of the actual reasons behind what we want. So early on, I would always take people at face value. Oh, that's the goal. Boom, let's get a plan together and then just go. And then they're good for 3, 4 weeks and they're motivated. And then all of a sudden they fall back because you never actually got into what's actually going on in the person's
Yeah,
life. And I think as coaches too, our responsibility is to not just take that at face value or even assume that like because this is something as I was reading this book I've seen a lot of people we just say, oh, my door's always open if you want to talk, right? It's like just leave. That's that is it's a scary ass thing to go into your coach's like room or even speak up from that because I've had this from clients I work with on with me of being like, oh, I didn't want to bring this up or so. Imagine being, a young kid with, a coach that you look up to who's like he's in charge. You just it takes probably a pretty rare person to have the audacity and like the enthusiasm
Yep.
going being like, hey, I got to talk about something with you. So
Yep.
I think so with that, that's actually a question. Like if you are like a coach, maybe you are building a program or so, you want to have an open door, you want to have good communication and this trust with them. What are like some things that I guess you would say to kind of really bridge that relationship right off the bat, with people? So we don't have to have these letters, in hindsight, years down the road of going back and telling you how this feel. What would you say on that?
I think to some regard, I would love if coaches would initiate some one-on-one time of just talking, getting to know the athlete, asking the question of what do you need from me? What do you that question we just kind of talked about, which is what do you need from me as the coach for you to perform optimally? What is an environment that you operate the best in? And if they don't know the answer, that's okay because again, like the athlete said in the letter, I didn't even know what I needed from my coach to communicate it.
Yeah.
Um, but we need to start by asking the question so that they can chew on it and then maybe come back. And if they don't have it in that moment, say, I want you, go, I'll circle back around because with the intention of, and I just love explicitly communicate, like tell the athlete, I want to know so that I can do well by you and I can
Mhm.
know what you need and we can discuss that. And I can also like, maybe if the athlete comes to you and says, oh, I need you to get into my face. And maybe the coach says, I hear you, but that's not really
Mhm.
I don't know if I could do that. Maybe they're a coach that's actually like getting in somebody's
Oh yeah.
face is just never what I can do. Is there a middle ground? Like, so you can compromise with the athlete, or maybe the athlete is saying, yeah, I do better when the coach doesn't get when you don't get in my face. Like, and for you as a coach to humbly be like, absolutely, I will work on that behavior change. And, if I do cross that line, like, apologize. So it's really just the more that we can just teach good
Yeah.
relationship tactics, and maybe for coaches, that is addressing your personal relationships at home, how you're interacting with your partner and your kids. That in and of itself is then that could be a way that you can also enhance those relationships that can boil over into your relationships with athletes. So I think
Mhm.
that's one thing is like asking those specific questions, showing up for the athlete how they need. Another one that I think is a really beautiful tactic I've had some coaches do, and there was a very nice outcome for this, is the coach wrote letters to their athletes, gratitude letters, like what they specifically appreciate about them.
Mhm.
And the beautiful thing about that practice is it's a physical artifact that the athlete has that they can go back to. So if you think about it, when somebody tells you like, wow, you did a really good job, or that was really great, it kind of goes in one ear out the other because of negativity bias. Like we don't have a tendency biologically to just, oh yeah, grasp onto the positive. But if there's a physical artifact that they can go to maybe in hard times or put next to their bed or whatever it is, um, I've seen that really enhance the coach athlete relationship a lot.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I one of my favorite things I saw. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Forever Strong.
Mm-mm.
It's a famous rugby coach out west, like of a high school team, and they were like great championships, but like the assistants were the ones that were always leading the practice and getting on him, and he would sit with two lawn chairs like on the side, and like he would just like one by one like guys would like come over and they would just be like sitting and having a conversation, and the one kid's like, what is he doing? He's not even coaching and stuff, and then eventually he gets in and he's like just talking about
Yeah,
who he is and his family. It was just a very
I
interesting
love
thing.
that.
Yeah, it's great. Um, well, Dr. Sara Erdner, thank you. So this has been a blast. I have so many more things I want to chat about, so we'll have to probably do a part two at some time
I
on
would
here.
love that, honestly.
Yeah.
Because even there were some things we chatted about before we started recording that I'm like, oh my gosh, I would love to kind of circle back. And
Oh
so
yeah, no
yeah,
doubt. It's how it
let's
flows.
absolutely do it. Yeah, let's absolutely do a part two. I mean, I think we could go down some productive rabbit holes that I think could add value for others
Mhm.
listening.
Yeah, no doubt. But again, I want to, preference. I'm really thankful, not just for the time you had here, but for this style of book. I said I love reading books. I love reading about different stories and stuff. But in this one of you really get into the personal experiences of it and this inviting in on the communication aspect. And then there's also the interactive piece of it of like getting your insights of what you took from this. I just think is the most powerful thing as a coach and just as a person who's trying to, work with people too. Like, I've learned over 15 years, it really comes down to just clear communication. If you have that down, the tactics, the strategies, all the other stuff, is going to come along for the ride. But I really think you struck gold with this one. So I hope you write a second book and
Mhm.
there's another one
Thank
coming up.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it.
No doubt. If people want to check out the book, just check out more of the work that you're doing. What's the best place that they can go to?
Yeah, so they can go to dearcoachbook.com. Something else as well, and I can send you this link if you want to put it in the show notes, is I worked with my publisher and I got there's a link for a free download to the ebook version. So if anybody on the dearcoachbook.com website, if you scroll down on the homepage a little bit, there's a free download button that you can go and get that. So if ebooks are your thing, on the bus as you're driving to a game, whatever it might be, just know it's free to you. I know access issues can be a problem for people,
Mhm.
especially with inflation and stuff. So I was really excited to get that option. And then there's other things on the website as well that you can explore. Reach out to me if you have any other questions, things like that.
Perfect. Awesome. Dr. Sarah, thank you so much. Till next time.
Thank you.
Listeners, thank you so much. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.